So you know the universe is talking to you when it says hi through the scratches on your water bottle. And also when you're about to enter the embodiment phase of your harvest of your life and somebody shows up in life who's already embodied and as a teacher perhaps. And also reading an article that somebody named Vironika wrote because she posted it on her Facebook wall. And I'm feeling that she might have seen that article partially because she read my article that I wrote through the Emerging Proud campaign. And so she already has that within herself, but I just mean she told me, hey, read this article, because she had read my article and thought it might resonate. And so I did. And I've been talking to myself about reading this article as a summary to my year-long conversation with myself. And I just pulled up the website today, and she also has a book called The Art of Talking to Yourself. And so to me, that's a big sign because I've been talking to myself for an entire year on video and I haven't shared a thing. And then as I'm in these days of summarizing that year, as it's leading up to the 1-year mark, I'm about to read something by someone who I think summarizes things really well, and then find out that they've written a book called The Art of Talking to Yourself. And I've sort of done the experience of the art of talking to myself, and I don't know if that's exactly what she's talking about in her book, but I just find it interesting. So the next part of this will also be reaching out to a selected few people, and I feel like I'm going to send her an email and reach out and send my Emerging Proud article and see what she thinks and see what happens. And the other interesting thing about her website is she talks about how to build a tribe or something, a love tribe. And I've talked about how, to me, this is the emergence of a neuro tribe, this whole whatever's happening with altered states of consciousness. And I'm not really saying all this very well because I'm kind of excited. So perhaps I will share a bit of that response. And I do want to read a bit of the article at least, because I think it goes along really well with what I just read to myself. And I was actually going to share my Fly Whisperer video next, but I felt like after reading what I wrote and not even really remembering what I wrote, I think reading what she wrote next provides a really good side-by-side picture of I'm not the only one that thinks like this or feels like this. I feel there's a lot of us out there, but we're sort of few and far between. But if we can build something together just in dialogue, then that will have a trickle down and a ripple effect to other people who haven't yet maybe just talked to themselves about it even. And so she wrote a book called The Art of Talking to Yourself, which I haven't read yet. And I feel like we could write a book together as the art of talking with each other about how we've been talking with ourselves, maybe in secret, in thinking this doesn't feel like a mental illness, it feels like a healing process, or it feels like if I could get through this I could really help people, or so many things. So it's interesting that I'm feeling it's time to be embodied, and this really embodied person is now in my life, and it's time to reach out to others, and I've seen somebody that I would like to reach out to first and go from there. And I'm getting down to the 1-year mark, and there's a few things I want to share before the 1-year mark, but if I don't get time because I'm spending time embodied, that's a good thing. So I will allow myself a bit of overlap, especially considering recent events and just having clues to just be in life more and be outside and be with people that I can be around and really bring out something else. And this person that I've been around even said something about I change based on who I'm talking to. So maybe I talk to you like this because I was saying if you say this kind of stuff to people, they don't understand. They turn away. They might lock you up, things like that. And he said, well, I change based on who I'm talking to. And I've had that sense too. And so this person is really pointing to things that I've had a lot of insights with myself and pointed to through my dialogue with myself, but actually the living embodiment of all that I've been talking about with myself that I would like to move into embodying. So I find that so fascinating. So fascinating. And maybe just sharing more about that. And I don't know if I will. I just think it's really interesting how reality matches up with level of consciousness. So as soon as I'm more clear, there's a person of clarity there. When I was going through those foggy times, it was fogginess everywhere. And so, yeah, and it's not a progression of time, it's a difference in consciousness. And so that's why level of consciousness is so important, and taking medications that dull that are very detrimental and can be very detrimental and can be helpful sometimes to actually lower that, but not all the time. So it's really time to find people who see like this, not just talk about it like this, but one can tell by the way people talk about this how they see. And it's not about how they talk about it, it's how they see. So finding the seers in a way, and the seers that are able to express what they see to sort of give insight into that. And maybe through my dialogue with myself, I've shown some of that capacity for insight. Not insight into one's mental illness, insight. And I feel like through the process of map consciousness, we gain insight. And then when it's warped into mental illness, and we never really feel like it's that, because we had such insight at a certain point in consciousness, or a certain space in consciousness. And then we're told by others we just don't have insight into our illness if we think it's anything else than illness. So is there an art of sharing this with each other? And today I actually edited both my videos from yesterday, which I usually don't leave it, but it was pretty intense to read it over. And I feel better now. I got through it. I think I took 2 extra vitamin C's, so a total of 5. And I feel better today, and I'm glad I read through it. And now I will read through somebody else's something, which I rarely do, and I find it interesting that I feel moved to do so after spending so much time unfolding things for myself, sort of providing some of the summary through what someone else wrote. And to me, it just shows that I'm not alone in the way I perceive things and feel things. And I spent a lot of time talking as those perceptions, not necessarily talking about context that's already been created to understand those perceptions, but speaking directly as those perceptions. And I didn't really say so much about I'm a healer, I'm a prophet, I'm a visionary, I'm a seer, and all those things, because being on meds, I didn't feel like that was true. And maybe some people can be on meds and still feel like that. I'm not saying that's not the way it is. It's just being on meds and having to take more recently, and then deciding to come off the meds with the help of Hearty Nutritionals. Now I feel more clear, like there is some truth to what is being said in this article. Are we drugging our healers and our prophets? And I feel like I was initiated into that healing process of map consciousness, and then I was drugged out of it, and now I'm out of being drugged. So I'm ready to be open to what the universe might ask me to do. What is it that the universe is asking of me? Not how can I fix my mental illness, or I'm afraid of my mental illness, and all these things that my life was turned into over the last 6 years. And maybe it'll be turned into that again. I'm not pretending that I'm safe. But maybe by moving in the vulnerability of wondering what life is really all about, and it's all about something different now that I'm not medicated. Inviting whatever is to come, and if I have to move as if something the universe has asked me to move as if, then maybe I have to take a chance on that and be vulnerable. And today is actually my 2-week milestone off medications, and that's huge. Last night I slept really well, and I feel more rested today. I got a bit more sleep, And so this article is on Vironika.org, spelled Vironika.org. And she's talking about a book called Detour from Normal, written by Ken. And she says, what struck me through Ken's entire mental illness experience, which includes hospitalization, hallucinations, and eventual psychiatric commitment, were three things. Everyone around him thought he was crazy and dangerous, while Ken gained abilities that some people vie to access with daily meditation and ceremony. And that's what I've talked about when I was talking about flow states and how people are doing all this stuff to get into flow and these superhuman capacities, yet people who just get them for whatever reason, through the universe or through some kind of experience, they're labeled as crazy. So it seems like as long as we go there through our own volition, it's okay, but if something else brings that to us, it's not. And that was my added commentary. And she says, our current mental health care system hasn't progressed since the asylum days as much as we'd like to think. Physical straitjackets replaced by chemical ones. Mental illness is a dream so bad, if you're lucky or well supported, you might just realize you're dreaming and wake up in a world where everyone is still asleep. And then Ken realized he wasn't the only one. He wasn't crazy, and he certainly didn't need medications. He needed some sleep, some support, and some encouragement to become the healer that he's now blossoming into. So I wonder if I need to get in contact with this healer perspective, or maybe it'll just contact me. Ken weaving tales of a utopian society, reaching out to help people, believing his presence could heal them, and seeing the world through the lens of perfection, court-ordered lithium. And now this is Vironika talking. My first vivid hallucinations when I was 18, and my boyfriend at the time looking at me like I was a psycho, and then the incredible amounts of nightmares and flashbacks that accompanied my healing process, all of them allowing me to process through traumatic and painful events. And what if I thought I was psycho? What if I took the pills I was offered? Would I still be here? And so it sounds like maybe she never took the pills, but just managed to get through the process. My favorite book of all time, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. The main character becoming obsessed with discovering the truth about reality, a truth so beautiful and ancient that few could deny it, only to be given electroshock treatment for his so-called dangerous mental illness. A woman reached out to me to tell me about keeping her son, clearly exhibiting symptoms of schizophrenia, away from doctors and pills. The son recovering fully a year and a half of sleepless nights later. Sam Shelley being diagnosed with bipolar, and after engaging in frequent dedicated meditation, coming forth symptom-free and ready to help heal the world. With all these stories in my head, it was hard to sleep. A darkness loomed over me, the darkness of a realization too painful to digest. Our mental health care system is breaking people. We have no room for the sacred, only the normal. The narrow range of accepted behavior and emotion expected from us is more resisting than most people realize. That is, until we experience beyond it, until we're judged, until we don't fit in, until we're told we need to fix ourselves. I'm not sure how I ended up stumbling into this article today, but you know how these things happen. It's called What a Shaman Sees in a Mental Hospital. In his village, the symptoms we commit people for, Dr. Somei's village recognizes as marks of a healer. They honor, respect, and nourish the very same patterns that we condemn, isolate, and drug. We're taking people with a completely different range of perception and calling it wrong. And I've definitely talked at length about that. We're weeding out our geniuses. We're killing off our prophets. We're drugging our messiahs. Were she alive today, Sylvia Plath would be on antidepressants. Salvador Dali would be on antipsychotics. Beethoven would be on lithium. Newton would likely be committed as well as heavily drugged for his multiple pervasive mental illness symptoms. Don't even get me started on Jesus Christ. If you're thinking that medications would have decreased these people's suffering while allowing their gifts and talents to be explored, I'd suggest reading Ken's book for a sobering look at the effects of lithium. Then get on Google and look up some common mental illness medications, their symptoms, and their side effects. Perhaps the drugs might have prevented some suicides, though even that is questionable, as you'll find on your search for that some medications have been linked to suicide and homicide. But suppose they had, then we'd have extended their lifetimes while they would have faded into the background, known by few, remembered by no one. The real tragedy is that in Dr. Somi's village, though they respect the mentally ill's healer's journey, they take precautions knowing that these people require an incredible amount of support through this time. How unfortunate that, in our society, those who refuse to take medications don't have anything to catch them or support them. There's no group of people willing to support and honor their new abilities, no one to celebrate their experience, no one to listen to them. And that part resonates with me deeply because I was talking about that recently, being out of the medication paradigm, and there's no celebration, there's no one to support that, there's no one to give me a bit of extra support if I need it, because I've chosen that I don't want to be on these drugs, I don't want to be drugged out, I don't want to fade into the background. I don't want to fade into the background of my own life. To continue, there's only the pain and the desire to get rid of it, hence the ledge. So what do we do? Where do we go? Where could Ken have gone, and whom could he have talked to about his experiences? How could Sylvia Plath have used her gifts without them killing her in the end? And I fear that for myself. How can the thousands of people in our culture who are suffering from mental and emotional distress get some genuine support, some help, some respect? How can we turn our mental health centers into places of healing and growth rather than confinement and apathy? How can we nurture the experiences of people who are perceiving differently from us in such a way that they can become stable and we can become wiser for having taken their perspective? Now that is exactly what I'm trying to say through all of this. And it kind of gave me goosebumps. How can we all come together and build the sort of society that Dr. Some speaks of, the sort of society that already exists somewhere, one that respects people no matter what they act, look, or feel like? Most importantly, how can we take mental illness activism past this stage it's stuck at now, where we say, it's not like cancer, don't say get over it, but the ones who go through it still suffer, still perceive it as all bad since they face a lower quality of life? Basically, how can we stop treating these experiences as diseases and start accepting them as gifts? How can we recognize the healers in those who are themselves healing? How can we all come together and make a world where we connect from our deepest core, from our interconnected, limitless potential? How can we learn to see beyond differences of habit and thought into the beautiful center that resides within each of us? How can the scientists, the spiritualists, the philosophers, and the dancers all come together and speak of their unique perspectives, each learning from the other? How can the manic, the depressed, the bored, the generous, and the needy come together, dropping their labels, and learn from each other? How can each human life be allowed to matter? How can we build a world where no one has to rot in a hospital or cage? How can we build a world where everyone simply wants to be good and do good? How can we stop arguing for a second so that we can hear ourselves agreeing? Honestly, I don't know. I don't. But this is not really about answers. This is about questions. I read in an old book once, confusion is the beginning of wisdom. Not knowing is the beginning of knowing. And that's what this is all about. This is about asking and continuing to ask until we make it work. This is about standing up and pointing out that the current state of our mental health care is not human. It's mechanistic. As we've seen in the cases like Ken's, it's cruel. And if we've seen in the cases like Robin Williams, it doesn't work. I hope no one takes this personally, because even if you're working every day to support the system and doing your best, you are not the system. None of us are the system. There is no system. There is only us, human beings, doing our best. Our inability to think differently about mental illness is no one's fault, but it's our responsibility. We can all come together and decide to do better. We deserve it. Your ideas are welcome, and she invites to share. So again, I didn't write this. I inserted some of my own commentary when I looked at the screen like blah, blah, blah. But reading this just really makes me want to email her. And I remember I did post some talks by Dr. Some on my blog. nutsaboutmelons.org, and they're really, really good. So yeah, I feel her questions at the end really sum it up beautifully, and they're the same questions that I have exactly. So finding brains that overlap with the way I see things myself, but it's sort of a less common way of seeing, so it's a bit more difficult to find people. It's kind of like if I have a very particular hobby, like collecting some kind of very particular antique, then I might not be able to talk to everyone in my neighborhood about that, but luckily with online I can find people that see things and are interested in talking about things that I am too. So next I'm going to share my fly video that I've talked about, and maybe talk a little bit about it after and what it meant to me at the time and what it means to me now. And then go into a little bit of spiritual stuff. And somebody told me about a documentary where this guy goes around pretending he's a guru, and that sounds kind of like a manic thing to do. So I might watch that and then talk about that. And I kind of want to go see Wonder Woman to get the superhero perspective. So we'll see what happens next.